Hey everybody! I have been reading in Jude the last couple of days and I wanted to just have you join me as we walk through the book of Jude. It's only, how many verses? 23 verses? It's not very many. But what's interesting about Jude is that he's writing to fellow Christians who are hearing false teachings, and it's bringing about a lot of confusion. And so, just as he starts off writing, he talks about in, I think, verse 3, it says, kind of gives us an idea of exactly what he's wanting them, he's urging them to do something. So, in verse 3, it says, I'm urging you to defend the faith that God has entrusted once for all time to his holy people. I say this because some ungodly people have wormed their way into your churches, saying that God's marvelous grace allows us to live immoral lives. So what was going on with this particular group of believers is that there were people coming into the church claiming that God's grace meant that they had freedom to live however it was that they wanted. And so that was their false belief that they were hearing and beginning to live according to. And so he spends time in the rest of the book talking about the characteristics of these kind of people, these kind of false teachers. So he talks about it in verse 8. He talks about how they've been claiming authority from their dreams, that they've been living immoral lives, they've been defying authority, they've been scoffing at the supernatural, and they scoff at things that they just don't understand. And then he in verse 16, he describes more characteristics. These false teachers are grumblers, complainers, they live to satisfy their own desires, they brag loudly, they flatter others to get what they want. So he's giving us a good picture of false teachers are going to have some of these characteristics. And so as he even gave some examples. I think it was in, verses 11. He gave 3 people from the Bible that if you want to, you can look these up too and just gain further understanding. He talked about Cain, Balaam, and Korah. And so anyways, as I was thinking about this, I was thinking, okay, one, I'm not so sure that I have a lot of encounters with false teachers, but false teachings, yes. Things that somewhat sound like it could be true, but not quite sure if it really is. And sometimes these come in the form of just statements, like you may, something comes across Facebook, or you may hear, I don't know, some kind of news story, and there is like a statement that's said, and it's like, I kind of like, the spirit inside of me is just kind of like, I'm not so sure what I think about that. But sometimes, and probably more often for me, it comes in like a whole idea that maybe begins to grow and starts to get traction in my heart. So like out there right now in society, there's this whole idea that you deserve. So you'll see like advertisements like, go for it, you're worth it, or you deserve it, buy this or that because you deserve it, so that like whole idea of, I'm worth it or you deserve it, like that, it's entitlement, and it's not good, but it creeps in. Like he described it, that they worm their way into your churches. And that's, I think, what happens is like false teachings can worm their way into my heart before I really know what's going on. And then at some point I have to just rely on the Spirit to help me gauge that. Usually it's like I find myself in a pattern of sin, like he described, like I find myself grumbling and complaining, or I find myself living to satisfy my own desires. So when those kinds of characteristics start showing up in my life, then it's like, okay, I need to take pause here and figure out what is going on inside of my heart that I need to root out. And so anyway, so as I was thinking about that, I started thinking about, false teachings. What's a false teaching right now? And I think something for me that came to mind was just believing that anything plus Jesus equals fulfillment. Like I have a bag full of gummy bears that I get into every now and then. And when I grab a few gummy bears, I think sometimes over time, like for me, like sweet treats and things can be like a form of fulfillment. Or like there's a certain Starbucks drink that I really like that is, some days I'm like, oh man, this has been a hard day. I need one of those Starbucks drinks, right? But that's not ultimately going to bring me fulfillment. I think sometimes it's like, if I can just get time to myself, like I can be fulfilled, or if I can have a heart conversation with a friend, or, get a date time in with Ryan, like that will sustain me. And some of those things are good and we should be able to enjoy those things. But I think it's when I start to look to those things to satisfy me, that's when my compass gets off a little bit. And Jude says, like, there's this really cool part in Jude that is just, it's so poetic. I love it. And so I want to read it to you. He's talking about these people. After he's told us these characteristics, he says some things about what they're like. So he gives us like a whole bunch of similes about what these kind of people or this kind of teaching is like. And it says, starting in verse 12, he says, they are like dangerous reefs that can shipwreck you. They are like shameless shepherds who care only for themselves. They are like clouds blowing over the land without giving any rain. They are like trees in autumn that are doubly dead, for they bear no fruit and have been pulled up by the roots. They are like wild waves of the sea, churning up the foam of their shameful deeds. They are like wandering stars, doomed forever to blackest darkness. Now, those are really powerful similes to me. And so just thinking about when I grab a hold of a false teaching and I don't give it due attention and I let it worm its way into my heart, they are like the dangerous reefs that can shipwreck me. I love thinking about like wandering stars doomed forever to blackest darkness. Like false teachings are going to lead us astray into a dark pit. And so I kind of identified just when I was talking about the wandering stars, or like the wild waves of the sea that churn up the foam of their shameful deeds. Those word pictures have been good for me to think about. Just what's some false teachings, maybe think about for yourself. What are some false teachings in your life right now that maybe have wormed their way into your heart? We're in such a unique time too, where I feel like maybe God is just in his grace, like been stripping me of some of these things. Because we're, at home and there's just not a lot, that we can do. And so even just like sometimes how busyness can be a fulfillment for me, like he's really stripping some of those things away. And so maybe there's some things that God is stripping away in your heart. And so, I just encourage you to think about maybe what are some false teaching or some things that you've begun to believe within yourself, and look back at Jude, how it talks about what they are like. They're like, there's quite a few things to get a picture of what they're like. Anyway, so I hope that encourages you. That's a little look into my own heart. And I hope that you have a great time just reading the word this morning and taking those things to God and just trusting him that he continues to want to renew and transform us. And that will never change. And that's a good promise for us today. So love you guys. Talk to you later.